there are a lot of areas where tailoring is possible. I am deliberately using the word tailoring. It is one of the concepts in CMMI. So that's what CMMI it is. However, it is not a standard. We all know ISO. So for example, an A4 size paper will be the same as in India as in the US. It will have the same dimensions because that's an ISO standard. But CMMI is not a standard. As we saw, it's a guidance model. It will help you only to uh, uh, interpret the practices in it the way you want it for your organization. And that's where the function of adaptability comes into picture. It's not a prescription. So it's not like you have an ailment and you can take a medicine and then it will give you an end-to-end solution. That's not the case. And which brings me to the third point, which is that it does not tell you how to do something. It is only what. It will say, for example, that you need a plan, but it will not tell you explicitly if you need it like in a Word document or a PowerPoint or an Excel. That's what it is. Every model of CMMI is divided into levels. These levels are for the purpose of comparing the maturity of an organization with respect to implementation of this model. There are 5. Although, however, if we talk about the first level, which you can see on your screens, it is not actually a level because it is not officially recognized. So there is no rating like level 1. So you cannot have a target of reaching level 1. Every other company is level 1. But the actual level start from level 2. So why is level 1 not recognized? Well, because as I said, if you are doing something, if you're performing a work rather uncontrollable and which is unpredictable and you are in reactive mode rather than in a proactive mode, well, you are level 1. So you are already level 1. And this is very important for organizations to understand, because when they hear about 5 levels, obviously 5 levels do not start from 2, it will start from 1. So this is something that needs an understanding on their behalf. The targets start from level 2. Level 2 is called as managed. As the name suggests, herein the organizations show processes that are fit or characterized for projects. So you have multiple projects going on. Each of them perform some kind of planning. Each of them do some kind of monitoring. There are instances of configuration management. And the requirements has a process. The requirements are managed. So the focus is on management of the work. However, still, if we compare any 2 projects or 2 departments, there will not be any consistency or similarity. In other words, there is no institutionalization. This institutionalization comes in level 3. By far, this is the most famous level as far as India is concerned. There's not many organizations that seem to know about that there is also level 2. Everyone starts with level 3. But well, this is a level which can be reached directly. So there is no precondition that you have to be level 2 in order to target for level 3. Also, in some organizations, you might see characteristics of level 3, although they are officially vouching or targeting level 2. Level 3 is called as defined. So the difference between the previous level 2 is that now you have processes that talk about the organization's rather than an individual way of doing things. In other words, you have processes that are characterized for the organization and they are proactive. As you build on level 3 over a period of time, you get enough measurement data or metrics data to have a historical database. This historical database now allows you to move from a qualitatively managed project to a quantitatively managed project, which is level 4. In level 4, the wonderful thing is that the implementers or the people who are managing projects or the work, they get an efficiency of predicting the process performance. However, remember that this is only possible when you have a good enough historical practice of following level 3. So in level 4, there is a lot of statistics involved, and all the statistics focuses on the performance of your projects. It gives the ability of predictions. It gives the ability to manage your project quantitatively because now you are able to see exactly where you are going. This is like having a GPS with you, where you not only know where you are, you also know where you want to go, you also know the direction in which you are heading, and you also know the distance to your destination. As and when you build on level 4, your processes are found or they are expected to improve on a great level. And when you remove the typical problems that occur and you now focus on further reducing your issues, you are called as continuously optimizing, which is level 5. So here it's like breaking your own Olympic records. For example, if you have improved your performance of some process by, let's say, 10%, then each year or with each defined unit, you will increase or improve by that much amount. So level 5 talks about innovations here, because mere process improvements, at the granular level will not lead to sudden changes. This is like taking steroids over just having some food. So when you have steroids, it's a boost. It's a sudden boost, and it increases your levels of either stamina or your performance. It may be for a temporary period of time, but then if you have the ability to continue in that performance over and over again, that is what is called as optimizing. So these are the 5 levels, and these are similar for any model of CMMI. If there are any questions till this slide, please feel free to type in the questions box. As I said before, I will take that questions and address them after the presentation is done. There are 4 constellations of CMMI. When I say constellations, they are actually implementations, the areas of implementation. We have CMMI for development, CMMI for services, CMMI for acquisition, and you have a very interesting part called as people CMMI. Let us know something more about each one of them. CMMI for services targets organizations which want to improve their services. They may not necessarily be service providers in the technical sense, but if there is any kind of tangible or intangible service that they're providing to the customers as an outsourced activity, for example, then CMMI for services definitely holds. This applies to the service industry. It focuses on the service provider rather than the person getting the service, although the impact of CMMI for services is directly on the customers or the end user. It addresses the capacity and availability management of resources. It talks about service continuity. It talks about service delivery. It addresses the incident resolution and prevention process because remember, customer complaints, which are called as special type of incidents, unless you resolve them, your service is of no use. It talks about service transition, wherein you focus on the new and improved methods of service components. It talks about service system development, because in some case the service provider actually is the one who develops the services and also provides them. Finally, it talks about strategic service management, which is about enhancing your existing services and then making them as part of your standard services. What you see here now are the process areas under CMMI for services. There are total 24 process areas. Each process area is a very specific area related to service industries. We will definitely have a webinar which will focus on each of these areas separately, and we will notify you about it. So stay tuned. CMMI for development, that should be easy. The most popular industries who demand CMMI are the software industries. Although this is not a rule that CMMI for development is only for software industries. As you can see, there's a picture of a lady constructing a robot. So CMMI for development is about development of anything. It's about manufacturing. So the focus is on the manufacturing process rather than the service process. So it applies to software development and manufacturing industries. It addresses the development activities as applied to the products or the services. In short, it addresses those practices that covers a product's life cycle. I am sure you have all heard of SDLC or software development life cycle. Well, CMMI is not an alien framework. It's actually built on that SDLC. So it addresses all these practices and phases right from the conception of a product through its delivery and maybe in some cases the maintenance. All in all, however, is on the work which is necessary to build and maintain the total product. And these are the processes of development. Process areas. We have 22 process areas, so there's two short. You can see from the previous slides that levels 4 and 5 each always have two process areas, while the rest of the process areas are distributed in the other levels. One thing to note, however, is let's say you are targeting 3. It does not mean that you have to satisfy or you have to focus only on these 11 process areas that you see over here, but you have to focus on level 2 and 3. It's like there is no elevator to the 3rd floor. You have to climb the stairs going to the 2nd floor and then you reach the 3rd. Then let's talk something about CMMI for acquisition. When you acquire a service or when you acquire a product, you might get a lot of help and guidance from referring to the model for CMMI for acquisition, because it provides a set of guidelines for acquiring the products and services in the best possible way. Remember, we said in the first slide that CMMI is a collection of best practices. So your organization already have acquired some product or services, or it might be planning to do that. However, in any case, if you refer to CMMI for acquisition, you might get a lot of valuable inputs on some of the best practices that are followed by other industries in the world who have gone through the acquiring model or acquisition model. So it focuses on activities for initiating and managing the acquisition of products and services, because finally the end goal is to meet the needs of the customers and the end users. Because remember, your acquisition will have an impact on your ultimate customers. However, even though the impact of this is on the end users, the focus of the model is on the processes as defined for the acquirer. And well, this is a snapshot of the process areas of acquisition. So we have 9 process areas each in the levels 2 and 3 and 2 each in levels 4 and 5, leading to a total of 22 process areas. So for organizations that are targeting level 5, they have to go through 22 areas. People CMMI, we will not talk much or elaborate more on it, except that this is very popular in organizations that lay a lot of focus on the people's evaluation and people's growth. It provides you with a tool that helps you successfully address the critical people issues in the organizations. Attrition, for example, is one area which is always the focus of the human resource department. So people CMMI actually helps you to tackle it, but in a different approach. So it helps organizations to characterize the maturity of their workforce and the workforce practices. It will help you to establish a program of continuous workforce development, which means when I say development, it's about the skills of the people. You will get ideas on how to set priorities for improvement actions related to people. And it talks about process improvement and establishing a culture of excellence among the staff. So all in all, this talks about people management and managing their growth for the betterment of the organization. We now come to the structure of CMMI. This structure will be common to each of this constellation that we just saw. So this is kind of a skeleton. If you remember, we spoke about maturity levels, namely 5 maturity levels. Each maturity level is a combination of certain process areas. As we saw, if I just go back a few slides, if you look at level 2, you will have 9 process areas over here. So maturity level 2 is composed of or comprised of 9 process areas. So each maturity level will have its own share or number of process areas, and the process areas in turn will be split up into goals. So goal in a general English terminology means what is it that you want to achieve, and a collection of such goals is what makes up a process area. However, there are some goals which are common across all the process areas, and which is why they are called as generic goals. You will see these generic goals under every process area in the model. While on the other hand, there are some goals which are specific to that particular process area. They are not repeatable and they are found to exist only within that particular process area, which is why they are called as specific goals. And finally, to satisfy or meet any goal, you need to do some work. You need to follow some practices. So there are practices under each goal. And because we have a classification of generic goals and specific goals, so the practices under generic goals are called as generic practices, while practices of under specific goals are called as specific practices. Roughly, the generic practices and specific practices in total, they make up, they are at different numbers, but on an average you will have something like 19 or 20 practices per process area. So let's say that you're targeting maturity level 3 now for development. So you will have to satisfy 18 process areas under level 3, and if each process area has at least 20 practices, so you have at least 300 plus practices to take care of. This is the kind of work which is involved in CMMI. However, these 300 or 400 practices do not mean that there will be 300 or 400 unique documents. Sometimes one evidence or one document can map to several practices, and this is what happens. And this is very important because this is one large misconceptions of most organizations, that they look at CMI as an overhead, because all that they can see is the number of practices, and there's only number of them. The model PDF itself is like 400 to 500 pages long. So we must always remember that although there are 300 plus unique practices, but they all cover different process areas, and well, you might be already doing them, you know. It is just a matter of looking at them from the evidence point of view. It is just a matter of habit or culture of recording everything that you do. It is like footprints in the sand when you walk. You don't have to show or prove that you have walked through sand. So it is essential to remember that you do not have to create anything. You have to do something. When you do or when you perform work, the work product automatically gets created. Now each of these models or constellations can be represented in two ways. There is a stage representation and there is a continuous representation. The primary difference is that if you talk about maturity levels, you know, like companies say, I am CMMI or we are CMMI ML3, which is maturity level 3. So maturity levels are given by the stage representation, wherein you rate the organization as per the levels or collection of process areas. Whereas in a continuous representation, it is capability level. So you have a choice of process areas. In stage representation, if you say that we want to target level 2, you don't have a choice of whether to select or whether to uh, you know neglect some process area or not, because if there are 9 process areas, let's say in level 2, you have to mandatorily target them. However, in the continuous representation, you have a choice of selection of process areas, because now you're talking about what kind of capability it is that you're looking for. Both, however, are appraisal methods and both are approved by CMMI. So it is essential to know the objectives of the appraisal from an organization. This table here will give you more idea on the comparison. We already saw 5 levels starting from 1, which is, well, not an officially approved level. So in the stage representations, you will have 5 levels, 5th one being the optimizing. In the continuous presentation, because it is only about capability levels, there are only total 3, because 0 again is similar to the level 1 in maturity level or in stage, which is not an official level. So there is nothing like level 0 actually. But here level 1 is possible. Now there are some roles and responsibilities which are necessary for the organization or all the stakeholders who are focusing on a CMMI project or a level. This is important to know because we all may start off with with a jump, but then we'll end up in a situation where we do not have enough resources or enough technical know-how to take care of this CMMI thing, as it is popularly called. So let us look at some of the roles which are necessary and critical for successful execution of CMMI. However, I have to emphasize one point here, that this is in terms of an appraisal. You remember, you can follow CMMI without even a target of going for an appraisal. It is up to you. But if you are targeting for an appraisal as a final milestone, then these are some of the roles that we must focus on and you must have. It starts with having a quality manager or somebody who will manage the process, because every organization needs one. Every organization has a process, whether you know it or not. It may not be tangible, but things cannot happen without some process. Just like you have this process of salaries, there is a fixed date on which it may arrive, there is a calculation, so these are all processes. So likewise, your services and your developments or your acquisition activities need a process manager. The scope of this person would be to manage the processes of that particular department, which means that there could be multiple process managers if the departments are too large. Then there has to be an SPOC, or a single point of contact. This is necessary particularly when you have outsourced some of your consulting work to external organizations. Having a single point of contact streamlines the process. See, here again we are talking about having a process. So having a single point of contact will facilitate the communication and ensure that there are coordination issues. Then there has to be an internal audit team, because this will be a team. I will call it a role rather than a team, because the questions that generally arise are, oh well, you say that we want an internal audit team, you want a SPOC, you want a quality manager, so how can we? It is not necessary to hire people specifically for this purpose. You have to look at them as roles and not designations. So your internal audit team, for example, would be entrusted with the task of checking the processes that are set in the organization, and if the different works and different projects are following that organization's process or not, and if yes, to what extent. Also, they are responsible for bringing out some of the strengths and weaknesses in an organization. Then you have an engineering process group if you talk about the development, or it can have a service process group, or SPG. These will work together with the process manager to actually write the processes for your organization. There may be areas where, well, we all do something, but there is no process defined. No one knows exactly which is the best way to do something. So the process groups will actually help the organizations to pinpoint on that area which really needs a process improvement or establishing of a process. They will set up the QMS, or quality management system, of an organization, which is necessary to start with any CMMI activity. They will liaise with the different operations groups and ensure that they have the required know-how. They will even impart trainings if required for how to establish a process or how to use the QMS. This know-how can also be imparted by the training department or the team, which are the next roles. Again, when we say a department, it does not need to always be a well-defined or on-paper department. You have to look at it as a role. So we need people to train the people internally on different areas related to software, related to services, maybe soft skills trainings, or maybe your etiquettes, or in general your inductions and your services, maybe even process. So this department will take care of the knowledge point of view. There is one process area in CMMI which is common to each of these constellations, which is organizational training. So this team will actually provide a lot of inputs to that process area, because this process area will define the kind of work required to be done by the people who have the role of internal trainings. Then we obviously have project managers and their team members, which we are not explicitly written over here. They will provide the actual data on the services and the kind of acquisitions that have been done or the software application that have been developed. All this, however, needs the support and approval and direction of the senior management. In fact, CMMI mentions explicitly that senior management support and direction is absolutely essential for successful implementation and realization of CMMI. So when we say senior management, there could be, well, a board of people, or it could be a single person. But in either case, the direction of the senior management is essential, because the objectives of the organization, the vision and the mission of the organization is finally connected with these CMMI activities, or rather should be. There is also a role of sponsor. Now, sponsor can be part of the senior management, so basically they both can be same or different. A sponsor is a primary person whose decision will be final and binding with respect to the CMMI activities. He or she will be the owner of the outcome of any CMMI appraisal. There are specific roles to a sponsor with respect to the appraisal, which are shared by the lead appraiser, which is another role, as you can see in the list. So lead appraiser is the one who will perform the appraisal for the organization. A lead appraiser is approved. I mean, nobody can just claim to be a lead appraiser. There is a badge given by CMMI Institute. So these are members authorized to conduct appraisals on behalf of CMMI. Now, every appraisal needs team members, and these are called as appraisal team members, or ATMs. There are specific rules as to who can become ATMs or who cannot, and these criteria are given by CMMI Institute. Now, to facilitate all this, consultants are necessary. Note that we have not written external or internal consultants, because finally the rule is important. You must have people to guide you on how to move ahead. What are the critical activities to be done in this context? So the role of consultants is also very critical over here. Apart from this, apart from the roles and responsibilities that we have mentioned, remember, everybody is a stakeholder in this CMMI activity, because this is not an individual certification. It is a rating given to the entire organization. By the way, at this point, I would like to emphasize one more thing. It is a habitual thing to call it as a CMMI certification. However, CMMI does not advocate or certify any organization. CMMI Institute only acquires or is the owner of this model, this process improvement model, and lead appraisers are authorized to perform appraisal on their behalf. Yes, a certificate may be provided to you at the end of an appraisal, but that is merely as an evidence or an approval or acceptance of some of these appraisals. Note also that, and which we will see when we move to the life cycle of an appraisal, that this is a long process wherein merely the lead appraiser's decision cannot mean that you have achieved a certain level or maturity level. So now we move forward to the appraisal life cycle. CMMI appraisals come under some rules and guidelines. There are three types of appraisals, and each one obviously follows the same life cycle, but we have given an example of one type. So there are three types, which is class A, class B, and class C. Class C appraisal are the least rigid ones. They can be performed without the need of ATMs. There is no rating generated. They can be called as a process improvement exercise. Class B appraisals are a bit more rigid. The expanse and the depth is more. ATMs would be involved, and there could be some findings that could be generated in B, which will be then provided to the organization for action, further action. Class A is the most rigid and the only type of appraisal which gives you a rating. Neither class B nor C can result in a rating. They can only result in some findings. So in class A, because we have a rating process, there is a science involved in how the appraisals are conducted, and all this is part of the whole appraisal life cycle. So typically, every appraisal activity or a life cycle starts with some advisory activities, because generally organizations have not yet got an experience of the model or an appraisal, and they are wondering how to start. It is necessary that it is the necessity or the responsibility of the consultants to provide guidance on what CMMI is about. And so it is necessary to provide them with some kind of overview training, which will only talk about, it's a knowledge-based training basically, wherein we talk about what the model is, how the model is structured, different process areas. So suppose an organization is going for CMMI for development. So the overview training will focus on the development process areas. This generally takes a couple of days if we have to cover level 3. It is necessary that the audience for this training should be the process implementers and the quality managers. Once this training is imparted, then either parties, both the consultants and the organizations, they have now reached some understanding of the current processes. This is kind of an as-is review. What are the processes currently in place? Because after the overview training, they may decide to add or enhance some of the in-house processes at their end. Once the processes are enhanced to an acceptable level within the organization, then there is a stage called as QMS reviews, wherein a gap analysis is done on existing QMS or existing processes of an organization. The rigidity with which this is checked is similar to that of an appraisal. Ratings are given for practices, not for the process areas, and detailed findings are provided in a gap report. The organization is then supposed to take care of this gap by closing the gaps. If required, there will be further cycles of review as long as the gaps are not closed. So until the gaps are closed, this review process should ideally continue. Because if your QMS is wrong, it is dangerous to implement it at the project level. It's like using a broken glass for water without checking if it's broken or not. So you have to mend the glass first. After QMS gap analysis, the project's data is implemented as and when the project goes. So that is implemented in real time on some pilot projects or target projects. We again go through the same activities of the gap analysis. This is again critical because finally this is a kind of data that will be reviewed during an appraisal. Project gap analysis would also sometimes need to go in an iterative cycle, especially when there are a lot of projects, and more so if their projects belong to different lines of business. At the end of these advisory activities, there is a start of the official appraisal activities. I say official because each of the activities that we are now going to see will be recorded in an artifact or document called as appraisal plan, which is maintained by a lead appraiser. Details of these official activities are duly shared with the sponsors from time to time. It starts with training on CMMI. It is called an official introduction to CMMI training. The audience for this training are only the ATMs or appraisal team members. So this training is different from the first overview training as a first activity in the audience, in that the audience is different. This training is usually followed by a training on SCAMP, which stands for Standard CMMI Appraisal Method for Process Improvement. It is nothing but a technique or a science of how the appraisal is conducted. Because the whole appraisal is a science, it is based on the art of reviewing and interviewing. So this technique is taught to the ATMs. Again, the audience here are only the appraisal team members. Official introduction to CMMI training takes about 3 days. Scampi training takes about 2 days. This is followed by a set of readiness reviews. We have to understand that at this stage, the organization has an army of appraisal team members who are expected to assist in the CMMI activities. If any gaps are pending, they will be closed at this stage, and which is what will be checked by the lead appraiser. So readiness review is an official activity conducted by a lead appraiser. It can be conducted on site or off site. The presence of ATMs is necessary, and at least one readiness review is mandatory. This is kind of a risk mitigation for an appraisal. The lead appraiser takes a final decision of whether we are good to go, Houston, in this readiness review activity. If all goes well, then the dates of the appraisal are conveyed. Appraisal rooms are set up. The preparation for Class A begins, or if it is Class B, it begins. Preparation also includes the resources like printers, internet, laptops, displays, and conference rooms. And this preparation status is conveyed by the lead appraisers to the sponsor. Then we move to the actual appraisal phase, which is called as the SCAMP Class A phase. For a typical level 3 appraisal, this can take any time between 4 to 6 working days. The Class A consists of data reviews or document reviews as well as interviews. Before Class A begins, the lead appraiser will provide a schedule of the appraisal activities. They will be having the coverage of the interviews, sessions, and document reviews and other activities which are necessary with the appraisal team members. Appraisal begins with an opening briefing, wherein the participants of the appraisal or who will be interviewed are notified about what is going to happen in the next 4 to 5 days, because they should understand what exactly is going to happen behind the scenes. So the lead appraiser gives a brief overview on the schedule, and it's an official kickstart. This is followed by the appraisal activities. It ends with another presentation if required, which is again non-mandatory, but the reports are generated at the end of the appraisal. These reports can consist of either only the findings, or if the sponsor wishes or wants, then maturity levels can be generated. Remember, the decision of whether to generate maturity level ratings or not rests with the sponsor. There is no force or mandatory requirement that maturity level ratings have to be generated. However, if it is a requirement, then Class A is the only type of appraisal which is allowed to do that. The reports or findings of this appraisal are then showed or shared with the sponsor, who is the ultimate owner of this appraisal findings or ratings. Along with the sponsor, this whole package is submitted to CMMI Institute. To explain the simple language, let's say we are standing at the last day of an appraisal and the lead appraiser declares that I recommend you level 3. He is expected to use the word recommended, because a lead appraiser cannot certify you just like that. The findings and ratings of a lead appraiser are submitted to CMMI Institute, which then has an SLA of 30 days to revert with queries, questions, or responses, if any. And they may also come back with approvals or denials, which is rare, by the way. Generally, we have seen that they reply within 15 to 20 days. Unless CMMI Institute officially accepts the results of an appraisal, the organization cannot declare it as having achieved a particular level. So what it means is that today, if you're having the last day of an appraisal and you have been rated as level 3 by the lead appraiser, you cannot disclose the information outside the appraisal room or outside the organization. You cannot display it on your website, no press releases. You must wait for the approval or communication from CMMI Institute. This constitutes the final results of an appraisal. In case we have any questions, please feel free to type it in the question box. And well, I can see 2 questions. We have a question from one participant. What is the role difference between process manager and the single point of contact? And the participant wants to know that whether both can play the same role. Well, yes, why not? So that's what I mean by saying that the CMMI model is flexible. In fact, there is nothing written in the model about who can or cannot be an SPOC. This was mentioned here in this presentation because our focus was on how to go ahead, what is the road plan or roadmap for implementation. So the answer is yes, both can play the role. Coming to the first part of the question, the difference. A process manager will be responsible for ensuring that the QMS is being followed by the organization, that the necessary internal audit activities are going on, and that the organization is ready for an appraisal if it wishes to, while the SPOC is merely a point of contact. However, having said that, if both are playing the same role, then it is always an advantage, because an SPOC can then be also a decision maker. And there's another question where, can ATM be same as an audit team? Yes. If there are cases where an appraisal team member is part of the internal audit team, what will happen is that this is a conflict of interest, which is one of the things which is researched while selecting the ATMs. However, sometimes there is no choice because the organization has small number of people. So if an ATM has been part of the internal audit team, the only action is that because of conflict of interest, that ATM will not attend the interviews of the internal audit team when it happens during the appraisal. So yes, that can be same. Well, if there are any other questions, you can feel free to contact us. We already have our contact emails IDs to you, and we will definitely let you know when we keep some webinar which will be specific on each of these constellations, or maybe also going further deep down, focusing on some critical areas within each constellation. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for attending the webinar and have a nice day. Thank you very much.